Strung Too Tight.
Hello the internet, Justin from Strung Too Tight UK here, and this is my review of TennisTension App. Now, after completing my UK RSA Stringers course and discovering a whole new world of understanding of strings, I decided that I wanted to purchase an ERT 300. I only really wanted to check the consistency of my own stringing, but for the life of me I just couldn't get one. By this time I was aware of the Pro T1. I didn't know enough about it to spend over £200 on the product, especially as I hadn't seen it in action. But I did see a few free apps on the Google Play Store. I tried them, they didn't really work. And then I came across TennisTension. Now I watched a few videos, read a couple of reviews, and it certainly didn't measure the dynamic tension that I was used to from an ERT or a Pro T1. Even today, I'm not really sure what it is exactly that it is reading, but it appears to provide results akin to the strung tension of the string bed, and consequently I was highly sceptical of the app. But regardless, it was only £7, and at £7 I thought it was worth a punt. And certainly worth having a little bit of a play, an experiment, and something to generate a review on the internet. So I bought it, tried it, and guess what? I was pleasantly surprised by it. The results certainly appeared consistent with the readings that I was expecting as a stringer, and additionally it did seem to show that my own stringing was consistent. So I went on to phase 2. I decided I was going to do a proper experiment to test the UK RSA claims in the stringing course, that there was little difference, if any, to tension loss between one-piece and two-piece stringing. Now the blurb on the TennisTension website says that it is the first working mobile app that instantly measures the momentous string tension of a tennis racket with extreme consistency and accuracy, and it claims to have an error margin of just 0.2 kilograms. They say it tracks the tension loss of a tennis racket's string at the time from the moment that the racket is strung, and it records and analyses the ringing sound heard from the strings when they're hit anywhere with any stiff object. Now, whilst I understand what dynamic tension is and why stringers choose to use dynamic tension as their preferred guide, dynamic tension will read lower than strung tension by some distance. That sometimes causes confusion with tennis players, and I certainly didn't know what TennisTension meant by the momentous tension. So I got in touch with them. I asked them to explain to me what it was, and they replied that it was the actual tension at the time of the test. So what I suspect is that it measures the dynamic tension based on sound frequencies and adds known constants for certain string types. Now the two rackets that I used were identical. They were Prince Thunder rackets. They were 100 head size and a 14-16 string pattern, and that therefore gave me the first problem, because it was one of the few string patterns, because in fairness TennisTension app has got a lot of string patterns that you can utilise, but it didn't have a 14-16. It did however have an extremely open setting, and that was the option that I used for this experiment. The string that I used was some cheap synthetic gut. I bought 2 reels of Pros Pro synthetic gut a few years ago. I use it to practice different string patterns, and I've started to use it for experimentation. I might do the same experiment with some poly, but in fairness I was really only testing the consistency of the app, and as a consequence I was happy with the results. The first, or the method that I was using, the first racket was strung 2-piece. It had 55 pounds in the crosses and mains. The last 2 pulls on each side of the mains were +10 with a Parnell loop. First and last 2 pulls of the crosses were +10, and racket 2 was strung around the world with +10 on each of the outer strings. The TennisTension readings were taken immediately post-stringing, and then at 8 AM each morning for 7 days. A final reading was then taken 4 weeks later. Both rackets were unused during the life of the experiment. Now the results. For racket 1, post-stringing 60, And for each of the first days of the first week, 53.7, 53, 52.6, 52.4, 52.2. It then went up to 52.7 and then 52.2. The final 4-week reading was 50.2. For racket 2, strung around the world, post-stringing was 61.4. Day 1, 53.7, 53.5, 53.2. The next reading was 53.1, then 53, 52.3, and then 50. And that's interesting because after 4 weeks it was 50.2, it had actually gone up. Of particular interest to me were the single readings where the racket showed a slight increase in tension. And in addition to the readings, I also strung 2 identical head speeds at 16-16, back to back with the same hybrid string pattern. Post-stringing readings were within 0.1 pounds of each other. And that was telling me that my stringing was consistent, whatever measure you were measuring it by. So in terms of conclusions, having strung both at £55 with +10 on various pulls, the post-stringing reading of both rackets appeared to me certainly to be consistent, albeit I was a little surprised that racket 1 with 8 pulls at +10 had a lower post-stringing reading than the 5 pulls at +10 around the world. That said, that of course is the advantage of around the world. The overnight readings were also consistent. They showed a drop-off of about 5% overnight, with around the world showing a slightly greater drop-off. And during the first week, both rackets again showed a drop-off consistent with my expectations, a little over 10%, and around the world showed a slightly better tension retention in the first week. Thereafter, the first month result is again consistent with previous experiments from other sources. I'd also looked at the Tennis Spin YouTube channel experiments. They'd done something similar. They confirmed that you had a 5% drop off overnight, a consistent drop off over a 4-week period. And in fact, these results, or my results with TennisTension App, showed something very similar. So the TennisTension results were entirely consistent with what I was expecting and what I would expect to get from an ERT or a Pro T1 device using their own their own dynamic tension measuring system. So the UK RSA assertion that there is little difference in drop-off between 1-piece versus 2-piece is confirmed, I would say, especially for club players, because after 1 month or regular use, the tensions were essentially the same. And of course, club players, they tend not to get their rackets restrung as often as pros. It does appear that around the world maintains a higher tension for a little less frame stress because there were fewer +10 pulls for a higher post-string reading. That said, most of my customers, most of the stringing that I'm doing at the moment is hybrid stringing. So, in the main, I'm almost exclusively using 2-piece stringing. If I were using 1-piece stringing, obviously I would use around the world. So what has to be remembered here is that those TennisTension App readings came at a cost of £7. The ERT and the Pro T1 are over £200. They are precision devices. There are no direct comparisons here, but certainly if you were a player or a coach or you're a stringer down at the club and you want something that's convenient to carry in a mobile device that actually delivers a good consistent reading, then you can't really go far wrong with TennisTension App for £7. Tremendous value for money. Not a replacement for the precision devices, but certainly a quick reference guide and an ideal way for players to know to use, so that they know when it's time to change the stringing on their rackets. So that was my review of TennisTension App. As always, enjoy your tennis.
Strung too tight.